Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Alright, so this one's coming a little sooner than what I planned for it to, because there's a few other Cable videos I wanted to do before this one, but for whatever reason, when I put up a video and the title says lead up to a certain character or event, you got people who want to jump online, throw up a bunch of Google images of that character, skim through that character's Wikipedia page, and call it a character explain. But personally, I believe you guys deserve better than that, and that's why I aim to do a lot of these spills on characters that nobody's really talking about. Alright, so now this version of Cable is one that kind of flown under the radar for a lot of people, but he's one of my favorites. And I think a lot of people miss this character because he is 1610, but he kind of isn't at the same time. And I'll explain that a little bit better in just a minute. But the first time he pops up in the 1610 universe is right before Ultimatum, where Wolverine and Professor X are still alive. And it happens at a time where we see Professor X with Nightcrawler in the infirmary, and Charles is really trying to help Nightcrawler get back in a better headspace, because his love interest at the time, which is Dazzler in the 1610 universe, was stabbed by Lady Deathstrike, and he flipped right after that. So Charles was kind of stepping into his mind and helping him work his way back from being so unhinged from a devastating event like that. And it's right here in the middle of this therapy session where Cable appears and he's stepping out of this bright light. And he's not here for any kind of friendly visit. He's here to kill Charles Xavier. And now you guys are probably thinking, why would Cyclops' son want to kill Charles Xavier? Why? But that's just the thing. This is not Nathaniel Summers, but this is James Howlett. Yep, Wolverine from the future. Okay, so now this is where it gets tricky, but I'm gonna make it all make sense in a minute. So now in our most recent James Hudson video, I'm explaining the Cataclysm, the multiverse, and how time traveling pretty much works in Marvel Comics. And I'll put up a link so you guys can get the more thorough version of it over there. But I just want to show you that for every Earth's beginning and end, the line that is in between represents time. And each one of these Earths that have a beginning and an end have their own number designation for that Earth reality. And so anytime somebody travels through time and changes an event, creating an alternate future, that's where we get these alternate timelines. And they can also cause rifts where people can cross over from one Earth to another. And that's how we got Cataclysm, but like I mentioned, I already did a video on that. But this is also how we got Kang in the 1610 universe turn out to be Sue Storm. And although her original timeline was 1610, her alternate future became 13074. And that exact same alternate future concept applies here with Cable. A different instance, but the same principle applies. And his future is not the same as Sue Storm's, it's different number designation, it's Earth 2107. But to each of them, the 1610 universe is a place before whatever crazy event happened that led to their future that they know as a reality. And also right here where Cable blocks Charles from getting in his head, he doesn't really explain how he does it, he just says that it's a secret. So it's not like he's telepathic, but they do mention that he has Cerebro technology, and he's able to block Cerebro from finding him while he's in that timeline. So Kitty Pryde's like one of the closest by who tries to stop Cable while all this is happening. And this James Howlett version of Cable in the 1610 is very much like the 616 Cable we know, because he's bringing all kind of gadgets into every fight. Like for example, this knife that he stabs Kitty with, he tells her if she changes her density at all that she'll bleed to death if she takes it out. Like he's got something for everybody. But with the commotion that's caused from fighting Kitty, it gets everybody else to jump up and come help out. But one of the main reasons that he needs all of these gadgets, it's different from the Cable we're used to. It's not like he's fighting a techno-organic virus and he needs assistance in that way, but it's because Apocalypse took his healing factor and ripped his arm off. And that has a lot to do with why he's here. And it also explains the scars on his face, because after Apocalypse rips his arm off, he claws Logan in the face with his own hand. Just straight up disrespectful. And even with him traveling back in time, that's one of the events that still has to take place. Because up until now in this Ultimates Comics X-Men series, there's been appearances here and there hinting towards Mr. Sinister, and things have kind of been unfolding for Apocalypse to show up. So when this older Wolverine travels back in time, he knows that Charles Xavier is the end game to whether Apocalypse succeeds or fails. Because at the time he appears at the school, this is weeks, if not a few months before Apocalypse shows up. And just as a side note, I gotta mention here that this Ultimate Apocalypse is strong as hell, because he really just pulled Wolverine's body from his arm with one hand, like it was nothing. I mean, even Ultimate's Hulk needed two hands to tear Adamantium apart. I guess he just wasn't mad enough. But either way, this is how Cable in this universe had the scars on his face and the metal arm. But going back to where we first seen Cable show up in the infirmary, Storm and his younger self Wolverine come to defend Professor X. And actually Storm and Wolverine had a little something going on here too, but I got other videos that'll tell you about that. But when Cable puts these bracelets on Storm, which initially don't do anything, she finds out as soon as she uses her powers that they're made to deflect electricity back to her. And this is where it starts to get real interesting between future and present Wolverine. Like for Cable here, it's not until he's attacked by Wolverine to where he breaks out the claws. And his past self is really the only person he's given any detail to. And it's not like he's telling him too much because he doesn't want him to mess up his plans. And he's more so telling him enough so he goes with it. And Wolverine doesn't best Cable in this instance. And he knows the younger version of himself. And with that, he knows that his younger version may fail at going directly up against Apocalypse. But also he knows that this younger version of himself is able at defeating this older James because he's much faster and he has a healing factor in both hands, for crying out loud. And when he tells Wolverine all this, of course, he's real skeptical. Like, look at his posture. He's like, I hear what you're saying, but I don't believe you. Because he's seen other clones of himself with claws before, so that's no big deal. He's even seen Sabretooth with claws before. But when he confirms to Wolverine that he knows that Sabretooth is his son, like at that moment right there, it just rings a bell. Like, how could this dude know that? Because the only people who were there who could have known was Wolverine, Sabretooth, and Storm. Because Sabretooth just popped up sharing this information with Wolverine when him and Storm were on a date. And James and Storm were keeping their relationship real low key, so it wasn't like they were just out telling everybody everything that happened between them. And so when he gives Wolverine that information, plus he explains the scars on his face and he explains his arm, then Logan kind of starts to buy it, but by no means is he's finna let him just kill Charles Xavier. And the crazy thing is that that's kind of the plan here, because this future version of James Howlett does not want to kill Charles Xavier. He just needs the X-Men to believe that he does as part of his plan. And it makes sense because in any issue of X-Men that you read, the relationship between Charles and Wolverine, it's really close. They're kind of like brothers. So to take this character like Wolverine and say in 30 years that he just wants to kill him, as tactical as he can be and as planning he can be, why don't you find another way to save the future without killing him? And that's exactly what he did. But he did need the X-Men to believe that he was dead, and he needed to take Charles Xavier out of the scene for a little while. So what he does, since he can't fight out the X-Men, is create a barrier, and he takes Jean. And he takes her hostage so that the X-Men will trade her for Professor X. And really, it's a few reasons why he needs the team to believe that Professor X is dead, and he needs Professor X physically away from there. So for the team's sake, he needs them to toughen up and get ready to face Apocalypse, because he knows firsthand from being there that they ain't ready. And that's really the end game of his whole plan, preparing them for Apocalypse. But everything up until that point, from acting like he's gonna kill the professor, kidnapping Jean, he has to make it all believable, because he knows the X-Men will use it all as motivation up until that point where they have to face Apocalypse. But shortly after Cable leaves with Jean, Bishop shows up. And Bishop just jumps through the portal like, where's Cable? I gotta stop him. Am I too late? Am I too early? Pretty much just putting on this whole persona that he's this badass that's gonna beat up Cable, say today, answer me now, do as I say. And Wolverine's pretty much like, shut the hell up. Because the next thing we see is Wolverine carrying Bishop into the room, almost as if it was too easy, but his timing is ever so convenient, and he happens to have all this information to lead them exactly where Cable's at right away. And he leads them directly to where Cable's at. And it's an old Weapon X facility out in Finland, not one that Wolverine's ever been to before, but it's one he knows he can use in the past because it's deserted. And I want to say the only two on this team that have been there will be Rogue and Colossus, because this is actually the headquarters in a Weapon X in the 1610 universe. But when they get there, man, like, I know this whole thing is calculated, but I feel like some people executing the plan, some people being Domino, were taking this whole make the X-Men tougher thing like a little bit too far. And it's like she knew that Rogue is close enough to Wolverine that she could absorb his powers and should be alright. But still, it's kind of risky because Rogue almost died here. But if anybody would take that shot, I guess it will be Domino, because luck is pretty much her mutant power anyway. So for her to aim and shoot with the intention of having her live, as lethal as the shot may have been, she would have the odds work in her favor because of her mutant power. And we see that's exactly what happens, because Bishop opens a portal for Iceman to jump through with Rogue, getting her to the infirmary right away. But it's funny seeing Kitty Pryde here, because she's recovering from her stab and she just sees this portal open up and Rogue with a missing arm, and she looking like, what the hell is happening? And Bobby's pretty much like, no time to talk, people dying, gotta go. But Rogue's arm does grow back eventually, because she was lucky enough to make contact with Wolverine before she got sent back. And just as a side note, this team right here is called the Six Pack, and they consist of Cable, Domino, Grizzly, Hammer, Kane, and Psylocke. But when Kitty tells Professor and Cyclops what happened, Charles rushes to go help, but Cyclops is like, no, wait, you're the one that he wants to kill. And it's driving Cyclops crazy that he's the one who's been assigned to stay back with Professor and protect him, because Jean's out there. And this is when we find out yet another thing that passes over into the 1610, and that's Charles being in love with Jean Grey. And man, when he tells Cyclops here, it's like, yeah, it's great, you can share your feelings and all that, but don't talk to me for the rest of this trip. Like, Cyclops really feels some type of way right now, even to the point where he just jumps out the Blackbird. Now, if your handicapped friend getting on your nerves, you don't just jump out the car before you park it, but apparently Cyclops would. But under the assumption that Charles will connect with him mentally if he jumped, he bails and tells Professor to tell Storm to let him down and the jet down easily. And you could tell right there he just don't give a damn at that point, because not only is he jumping out without a chute, but his plan is to tell so-and-so to tell so-and-so. Like, come on, man, that's too many people passing the message around. But I'll say this, though. I know how you got your Avengers, be like Avengers Assemble. Right here, Xavier's like, X-Men go limp. I'm just saying. Can I get that on a t-shirt? But Cyclops is being real reckless here, Because with Jean being captured and with the recent information that Professor X shared with him, his focus is compromised. And that allows Cable to take him down pretty easy while keeping up the facade of trying to kill the professor. Because really, if he wanted to kill him, he could have killed him back in the infirmary. And at this point, nobody's figured that out yet because he's put up such a good facade. He's playing off their vulnerability and their emotions because to him, remember, this X-Men team is weak. So while using the appearance of Charles's death, he also wants to show them that vulnerability as well. So when he gets in position and has Cyclops at a safe enough distance, he lets off a charge. Knowing that the explosion would knock him outside, probably didn't know about that rock right there. He missed it by a couple inches, but Cyclops okay. But he used that explosion to lead the X-Men to believe that Charles was dead, and that he also killed himself, making sure that the job was done. And it worked. They mourned Professor, they had a funeral and everything. But Wolverine, who was skeptical, didn't really say anything because he only smelled his scent out of the wreckage, which only proved Cable's point even the more. But as the weeks go by, we get to see that Bishop is reporting to Cable the progress of the X-Men. And it goes to show that the plan is working. Mutants like Dazzler recovered from her injury fully, she's gone supernova, and everybody's showing progress. It's just that Bishop has to keep his communication with Cable secret, because if he doesn't, they'll find out that it was all a ruse and they'll lose their focus before their main objective. And as we jump over to Cable, who's now in the future, he left Bishop stranded in the past because Bishop needs to be the leader of the X-Men right now. Cyclops is in his feelings. He said that Xavier's dream died with him, and he set in place for the school just to be a school. And that's where Bishop came into play, like, no, the world needs the X-Men. And Cyclops was like, okay, fine, you can have it. And so while Bishop's in the past playing his part and pushing the X-Men forward, Cable's now in the future getting ready to do his part and pushing Charles forward, which is the final part of his plan, turning Charles Xavier into Onslaught. And he didn't have time to do this in the past or go back further in time because, one, the longer he stayed in the past trying to convince them and get things ready, he'd be risking the chance of Apocalypse manifesting earlier. And two, by just taking Charles to the future, he's able to just explain to him what's happening. Like, he doesn't have to convince the whole team. He just talks to Charles. So to Cable, it just made more sense to do it this way, because any other option he's looked at for doing this has a much higher failure rate. And so after Charles is ready, he sends him back with Stryfe to the date where the X-Men officially failed to stop Apocalypse. And I know you guys like, whoa, wait a minute, where did Stryfe come from? Alright, so this Stryfe right here is also James Howlett. Nothing too crazy, just with a new mission designation, he also changes his code name. Because at one point in time, he went by code name Weapon X, or one time it's Wolverine. It was the same ordeal when he went by the name Cable. Because when he chose the name Cable, it was only serving a purpose. And at that time, that identity served the purpose of getting the X-Men ready to face Apocalypse. And like, to me, each time I read this run, that part of it makes sense more each time. Because if he just came back from the future like, hey, I'm James Howlett from the future, every one of the X-Men is going to have their own question on what happened to his arm, what happened to his face. Oh, you weren't here for that last part? Hey, start over again. So by creating these different identities, it just minimizes the risk. Although when he does come back here, he does explain it to a couple people, like Jean, he lets her know, because he opens up his mind to let her in and see who he is. But when Onslaught goes up against Apocalypse, he's able to resist him. And this is a much different Apocalypse than what we're used to as well. Because in this manifestation, he pretty much takes the body of Mr. Sinister as part of his rebirth before he faces off with the X-Men here. And as he collects different powers, his physical appearance also changes as well. And so here with Onslaught or Charles not being able to stop Apocalypse, this is where Plan D or Plan Z kicks in. And right here we're going to jump back to the issue where Cable had Jean prisoner and the six-pack and the X-Men were facing off outside. Alright, now so each detail and each part of Cable's plan has a purpose to it. And so when he picks Jean specifically to be taken as a ransom for Professor X, it's not like he's just grabbing straws here. But he also wanted to have her somewhere where he can keep a close eye on her, because he knew the Phoenix Force was hidden within her. And also, when the time came and everybody had to face Apocalypse, he wanted to set up as many things as he could in motion to defeat Apocalypse. And the Phoenix Force isn't one of those things that is predictable so much to where you can go 1 + 1 and boom, you're the host. This is more of a wild card that he was hoping to provoke more to happen, because in the 2107 timeline where him and Charles just came from, Jean didn't turn into the Phoenix. She was still hiding the Phoenix Force within her. She had revealed it before, but Charles was helping to keep it locked up inside of her. And all this remained the same in both timelines until Cable went back in time, took Charles, and put that seed in Jean's mind. Because now when she didn't see the Phoenix Force as a threat and seen it as something she can cope with and accept, she allowed it to come forth while Apocalypse was about to absorb Charles and everybody else's powers. And that's really what ended everything right there. Because even though Apocalypse considers himself to be a god, and there's really no other mutants that can oppose him, he still doesn't stand a chance against the Phoenix Force. Because between the two of them, it's not even a battle that takes place. All she really does is stand next to him, which melts him down to the humanoid form that's within, exposing the host, which is Mr. Sinister. But that'll do it for this one, guys. I hope the whole timeline thing didn't get you guys all mixed up, because this story mainly just deals with 2 timelines, like your 1610 and then your 2107. So arguably this Cable, Stryfe, and Onslaught can all be categorized as 2107 characters because they all originate in that timeline. But for the sake of simplicity, I'd rather do their explanations with the 1610 characters, because in that universe they do more significance. And aside from that, the Stryfe that does originate in the 1610, he's really not even worth mentioning. But hit me up in the comments below, let me know your thoughts, or even just tell me if you feel like Cyclops was a jerk. And if you ask me, I feel like Wolverine did enjoy going back in time and roughing him up some too. But don't forget to smash that like button for your boy. And I got links up so you guys can check out my other videos on the 1610 universe, 616 universe, and all that other stuff. But that'll do it for this one, guys. I'll catch you on the next one. Alright, later.